When my son, the boy I once taught to tie his own shoes, hurled a mug of scalding hot coffee into my face, screaming that I was nothing but an obstacle to his future, I knew this wasn't about business anymore. It was about a father's honor being trampled. My name is Raiden Miller, and I am 73 years young. I was once a successful real estate developer in the Pacific Northwest. Now I live alone in the old family estate, a large colonial-style house nestled in the misty hills of upstate New York. My wife, Elaine, passed away 6 years ago from pancreatic cancer. The disease came suddenly, stealing her away in less than a year. Since then, this house has felt too vast, too silent. It was a cold, foggy afternoon, typical for the area in autumn. I sat in the living room, as usual, reading a biography of Benjamin Franklin, while sipping warm ginger tea. I've read the book countless times, but each reading unearths something new. Outside, the fog was beginning to shroud the tall pine trees. The atmosphere was quiet, peaceful. Suddenly, the roar of an engine shattered the calm as a car barreled into the driveway. A white Lexus SUV braked harshly in front of the porch. A door was slammed shut violently. I knew who it was before I saw their faces. My only son, Brett, 37, and his wife, Scarlett. A woman I've always sensed was too cunning behind her sweet smile. Brett strode in without knocking, without a greeting. Scarlett followed, wearing an outfit that was far too flashy for a visit to her father-in-law's house. Her face was covered in heavy makeup. Her lips were smiling, but her eyes weren't. "Dad," Brett said, his voice loud and full of entitled confidence. He didn't even sit down first. "I need to talk. This is urgent." I closed my book and placed it on the side table. "Sit down first, Brett. Would you like some tea?" No, I don't. This is serious." He pulled a chair over, sitting with his body pitched forward, like a person ready to attack. Scarlett sat next to him, hands folded neatly in her lap, her sharp eyes watching my every move. "Dad, I need capital," he blurted out. $8.2 million. I didn't answer right away. That figure was no joke. I looked into his face, searching for a sign of sincerity. There was none. "For what?" I asked softly. "My new project, Pillars Logistics X. A high-tech AI-driven logistics app for the ethical food market. The Midwest market is wide open. We have interested investors from the Gulf states. It's a huge opportunity. We're pitching the ethics." "You'd like that, wouldn't you?" I listened without expression. Pillars Logistics X, a name that sounded grandiose. But I knew this wasn't the first time Brett had come to me with a grand dream. His last venture, a failed delivery app, still left him with $250,000 in debt. Debt I quietly paid off in part to keep the family name respectable. "Brett," I said, putting my teacup on the table, "what about your last business?" His face darkened. That was different. That was my partner's fault. This time I'm running it solo. I've learned my lesson. "Learned your lesson from a $250,000 loss?" Scarlett interjected. Her voice was soft but piercing. "Dad, you love Brett. How can you not help your own son's future? You're not doing anything with your time here anyway. What's the point of holding on to that much in assets?" I stared at her. Scarlett always knew how to flip the situation. Always knew how to make me look like the villain. "My retirement savings are not for funding the fantasies of an adult who has forgotten reality," I said calmly. Brett shot to his feet. His chair scraped harshly on the floor. "You don't get it, Dad. The world has changed. You still think like someone from the Great Depression era. You're technologically obsolete." Technology is not an excuse to gamble money without careful calculation. "You think I'm not careful? I've presented to dozens of investors, Dad. They're interested. I just need the seed money." I remained seated, staying calm, but my chest started to tighten. Not because of his words, but because of his tone. He spoke to me as if I were a burden, as if I were an imbecile who understood nothing. Scarlett stood, walking closer. "Dad, we're just asking for help. Not all your wealth. $8 million is nothing compared to the assets you own. So you've calculated all my assets? I asked, looking her straight in the eye. Scarlett paused, then smiled. That's not it, Dad. We just care. Care. The easiest word to say, the hardest to prove. Brett paced back and forth, his hands clenched into fists. He was frustrated. He was angry. But not because I wouldn't help him. He was angry because I wouldn't obey his demand. Then something snapped. Brett saw the coffee mug on the table. The mug he had just asked me to prepare for him. He lifted it for a moment. I thought he would drink, but he didn't. With a swift movement, he dashed the contents of the mug into my face. It was hot. The liquid burned my skin and chest. I flinched but didn't cry out. My eyes closed briefly, then opened again. Coffee dripped from my chin onto the dress shirt and vest I was wearing, a favorite outfit Elaine had given me. The room fell silent. Scarlett wasn't surprised. She didn't even move. Her eyes held a cold expression, as if this had been planned. Her hand briefly went up, holding her phone, as if she wanted to record it. Brett yelled, his voice breaking the silence. See? You can't even fight back. How can you still manage millions of dollars in assets? I rose slowly. Coffee still dripped from the tip of my nose. My shirt was soaked, but I wasn't trembling, wasn't crying. I just looked at my son. The boy I used to carry on my shoulders, the one I taught to ride a bike, the one I drove to school every morning. I reached into the inner pocket of my coat and pulled out a stack of checks. On top was one dated 3 days ago, a nominal amount of $1.3 million. The check I had prepared earlier as a final gift. If only Brett had shown a shred of respect, just a shred. Brett stared at the check. His eyes widened. Scarlett stepped forward, her lips parting. I slowly raised the check, looking at both of their faces. Then, calmly, I tore it in half. The sound of the paper ripping was loud in the quiet room. The pieces of the check fluttered to the floor. Scarlett froze. Her face was pale. Brett stepped forward halfway. His mouth trembled, but no words came out. I gave them no room to speak. In a calm, almost whispering voice, I said, "You have just burned the last bridge that could have saved you." I turned, walked into the interior of the house, leaving them standing in the living room under the dim light, surrounded by the paper fragments and the pride I had just destroyed. Outside, a drizzle began. I heard the sound of the car door being slammed shut. The engine started. Then the white Lexus SUV sped away from the driveway. I stood by my bedroom window, watching the fog grow thicker. My hand trembled, not from fear but from anger. Anger at myself for letting this go on for too long. Anger at a son I no longer recognized. But I knew this was only the beginning. The war had just started and I would not lose. I thought memory would shield me from reality. But as I opened an old album and looked into the eyes of my son at age 5, I realized that the boy I once loved was dead. All that remained was a shell, coveting my fortune. That night, sleep was impossible. I sat in my study, the low yellow lamp casting a warm glow. The rain was still drumming on the shingled roof, a rhythmic sound like impatient tapping fingers. I opened the small safe hidden in the corner of the room and took out a faded brown leather photo album. The cover was cracked in places, but the contents were intact. I opened the first page. A photograph of Brett at age 5 learning to ride his bicycle on the driveway. I remember that day. He fell 7 times, scraped his knee, but didn't cry. He stood up, smiled at me, and tried again. I was holding the bicycle seat, running behind him, shouting, "I got you, buddy! Don't be afraid!" The next page. Brett receiving his first baseball glove. No, that's too local. Let's make it more general. Brett receiving his first Boy Scout merit badge. His face was beaming, his eyes sparkling. He hugged the badge tightly, then hugged me, saying, "Thanks, Dad, I'm going to wear this every day." I turned another page, a photo of Brett graduating from the prestigious state university, black gown, proud face, holding his diploma. I stood next to him, my hand on his shoulder. Elaine was smiling broadly, tears of joy in her eyes. The three of us looked perfect, a complete family. Then the wedding photo. Brett in a black tuxedo, Scarlett in a white wedding gown. They stood at the altar in the grand ballroom. Their smiles were wide. But for some reason, looking at the photo now, Scarlett's smile seemed different. There was something in her eyes I hadn't noticed before. Something cold. I closed the album. My chest felt heavy. The son I knew in these photographs was gone. I don't know when he vanished. Maybe slowly without me realizing it. Or maybe he was never really there. Perhaps I was just too naive, too desperate to believe that my son would always be a good man. The change accelerated after he married. It was subtle at first. Brett became busy with work, rarely coming home. If he did, it was brief, then he was gone again. Scarlett would always say, "Brett's got a lot of big deals on the table, Dad. Just pray for his success." I understood. Young men need to focus on building their future. But gradually, I began to feel like a guest in their own house. When I visited, Scarlett greeted me warmly, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Brett sat in the living room playing on his phone, seldom talking, rarely looking at me. Then the subtle, painful remarks started. I recall a family gathering, a nice dinner at a relative's house. We were sitting around the table. Suddenly, Scarlett whispered loudly enough for me to hear, "My father-in-law sometimes gets confused, you know. He called me by his late wife's name earlier." I froze. I distinctly remember not calling her Elaine. I was certain. But Scarlett had planted the seed of doubt in others' minds. Several guests turned, looking at me with pity. A look that seemed to say, "Poor guy, he's losing it." From that day on, Scarlett began building the narrative that I was becoming forgetful. In the family chat group, she'd post messages like, "Dad forgot to turn off the stove today. Good thing I dropped by the house." I never forgot to turn off the stove. I had lived alone for years, never an issue. But the narrative was built slowly, carefully, like someone laying the foundation to demolish a large building. A few months later, Brett came again, this time alone. His face was serious. He sat on the sofa, hands folded, staring at me for a long time before speaking. "Dad," he said softly, "this house, it's too big for you." I put down the book I was reading. "What do you mean?" "You're living alone, Dad. A house this size is hard to manage. Huge yard, too many rooms. Aren't you tired?" "I manage fine, Brett." He sighed as if talking to a stubborn child. "Dad, you're 73. If something happens, there's no one to help. You should move to a good retirement community. There's a fantastic one in Palm Springs. They have Bible study groups, senior exercise classes, peers your age. We'll handle all the costs." I stared at him. "This house is where you grew up, Brett, where your mother died. It's not just a building." "Exactly, Dad. Too many memories here. It's not healthy for you, mentally." "Who says I'm not healthy?" He didn't answer, just stared at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Then he left, leaving me with the question hanging in the air. A week later, a young woman came to the door. She wore a neat blouse, carried a document bag, and smiled warmly. She introduced herself as an official from the County Senior Services Agency. "Mr. Miller, I'm Ms. Jenkins from the Senior Wellness Foundation. I'd like to chat for a moment, if you don't mind." I let her in. We sat in the living room. She pulled out some papers and began asking questions in a gentle tone. "You live alone, correct? Does your son visit often? Do you ever feel lonely or confused about your daily routine?" The question sounded innocent, but I grew suspicious. This wasn't a casual interview. It felt like an interrogation wrapped in kindness. "Have you ever forgotten to turn off the stove or misplaced items?" "Never." "Do you ever feel anxious without cause?" "No." She smiled, writing something on her paper, but the smile wasn't genuine. I knew she had formed a conclusion before arriving. She only needed confirmation or evidence she could manipulate. After she left, I called Mr. Harrison, my longtime attorney. Mr. Harrison is a meticulous and honest man. If something was wrong, he would know. Mr. Harrison, is there anything strange with my legal documents lately? His voice sounded hesitant on the other end. Mr. Miller, I've been meaning to tell you something, but I was worried about misunderstanding. To put it simply, a few weeks ago, Brett came in. He brought your deed to the rural acreage in Oregon, saying you wanted to mortgage it for business capital. But I felt the signature wasn't an exact match to your usual one. My gut told me something was off. My chest felt pierced. So Brett had gone that far. He had forged my signature, tried to illegally mortgage my property without my knowledge. I refused to process it, sir. I insisted you come in person to confirm. But Brett said you were ill and couldn't leave the house. I still refused. I tried calling you afterward, but you didn't answer. I was silent. So Brett had become that desperate. He was willing to forge my signature, steal my rights. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. You did the right thing. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from anger and disappointment. My son, my own flesh and blood, had dared to falsify my signature, dared to steal from me. A few days later, Mrs. Davis, the neighborhood association president and an old friend of Elaine's, came by. She brought food in a casserole dish. Her face looked worried. Mr. Miller, may I talk to you for a moment? Please, Mrs. Davis. What is it? She sat down, nervously wringing her hands like someone who wants to talk but fears causing hurt. Sir, forgive me if I'm intruding, but I think you should know. Scarlett has been telling people at the women's group that you can't manage your own finances anymore. She says Dad is becoming a danger to himself. I looked at her. She said that? Yes, sir. And many people believe her. They say you need help, that it's sad. But I've known you for a long time. You're not like that. Thank you, Mrs. Davis. You still remember your promise to Elaine. She smiled sadly. Elaine once told me, Sue, if I'm gone, please watch out for Raiden. He's too kind-hearted. I never expected the danger to come from his own child. That night, after Mrs. Davis left, I sat for a long time in the dark living room. The lights were off. Only the moonlight entered through the window. I stared at the framed photo on the wall. It's one of Brett graduating college, smiling proudly. I whispered softly, as if he could hear me, Brett, why did you become this way? But the photo was silent. The smile on his face felt hollow. I got up, walked to my study, and opened the old laptop I rarely used. I created a new folder. I titled it Final Steps. Inside that folder, I began storing all the evidence. Screenshots of conversations and notes of events, names of people who could be witnesses. I knew it wasn't enough yet, but it was a start. Tomorrow I would meet with a lawyer, not to attack, but to protect myself and, if necessary, to fight back. I wasn't an active social media user, but when the neighborhood association president knocked on my door asking, Mr. Miller, is it true you often forget to turn off the stove? As mentioned in the group chat, I realized Scarlett was no longer playing a silent game. She had started an open war. That morning, I had just finished my prayers. The upstate New York air was still chilling. I was brewing coffee in the kitchen when Mrs. Davis rushed in. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. Mr. Miller, have you seen it? Seen what, Mrs. Davis? She pulled out her phone, opening a messaging app. The screen was full of screenshots from various groups. I took the phone, reading them one by one. My chest felt hot. The first status was from Scarlett's account. An old family photo, Elaine, me, and little Brett, with a long caption. Loving a parent who is starting to forget is not easy, but we keep fighting. Pray for us to have strength. Below it, dozens of sympathetic comments. Stay strong, be patient, there's always a way. Poor Dad. I scrolled down, another story on the app with a background photo of the misty hills and white text in the center. Sometimes we get blamed for caring too much. Then, the most painful one, an audio recording of crying. It sounded like Scarlett's voice, with sad background music. The caption, "Oh God, give me strength." I didn't know if the crying was real or staged, but clearly hundreds of people had watched it and believed it. Mrs. Davis, this is all lies. I know, sir, but others don't. Scarlett is a master at playing on emotions. She makes herself look like the suffering, dutiful daughter-in-law. I returned the phone and sat down at the kitchen table. My head was throbbing. Scarlett was not just attacking me within the family. She was attacking my reputation in the community. The effects were immediate. Mr. Johnson, the regular produce vendor, who usually delivered to my house every morning, suddenly stopped. I waited until noon, nothing. I called him. He said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller. I've got too many deliveries." But I knew it was an excuse. He was afraid of getting involved with someone considered unstable. The neighborhood kids who usually played baseball in my yard stopped coming too. They used to stop by for a glass of water. Sometimes I gave them $1 for ice cream. Now their parents forbade them. I saw a mother physically pulling her child away when they walked past my house. At the church, the situation was worse. I came for Sunday service as usual. I sat in my usual pew in the front. But this time, the two men sitting next to me slowly shifted their positions away from me. They whispered, then glanced at me. Their looks were not of respect, but of pity mixed with suspicion. After the service, I approached the church treasurer to renew my routine donation. Mr. Peterson, the treasurer, received me awkwardly. "Mr. Miller, thank you for the intention, but for now, we'll postpone it." "Why, Mr. Peterson?" He didn't dare to look me in the eye. "We're worried about potential issues later. You see, we heard from Brett that you're having trouble concentrating." I took a deep breath. So the news had reached the church board? Brett and Scarlett worked fast. "Mr. Peterson, I'm healthy." "I have no problems whatsoever." "Yes, sir. But we have to be careful. This is church money, sir. We can't be careless." I didn't press the matter. It was pointless to argue with someone who was already convinced by another person's version of the story. Returning from the church, I felt exhausted. Not physically, but mentally. It felt like fighting a solitary battle against an invisible enemy. But little did I know, Scarlett's attack had just begun. A few days later, I received a call from the bank where I held a significant deposit. The officer's voice was formal and cautious. "Mr. Miller, this is Ms. Thompson from the bank. We need to confirm something. Someone came in earlier claiming to be your son, carrying a power of attorney document to access your account." My heart pounded. Power of attorney? I never created one. "We were suspicious, sir. The signature looked different. That's why we called you directly. Do not process it. It's fraudulent." "Understood, sir. We already rejected it. But we advise you to come to the bank immediately to update your security data." After hanging up, I sat on the sofa for a long time. Brett had tried to access my account. He was desperate. There was no remnant of respect or shame left. The next day, a young woman arrived, dressed neatly, with an ID card hanging around her neck. She smiled warmly, too warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Miller. I'm Ms. Sari. I'm here for a routine cognitive assessment for independent seniors from the County Department of Aging." I stood at the door looking at her. "Assessment? I never signed up for one." "This is a government program, sir. Free of charge to ensure seniors living alone are safe and healthy." Something was wrong, but I decided to let her in. I wanted to see how far this game would go. We sat in the living room. She took out several papers and began asking questions in a gentle but leading tone. "Do you often feel lonely? Oh, have you ever seen or heard things others don't know? Have you ever forgotten the way home when you went out? Ever?" She wrote notes, then smiled. "Do you ever feel angry without cause?" The questions were a trap, all designed to make me look insane. I answered calmly. But secretly, I had activated the small camera hidden in the bookshelf. The camera I installed after the incident with Brett. After she left, I checked the recording. I replayed our conversation. Then I sent a photo of her ID badge to my old friend, Mr. Hendricks, who worked in the state legislature's Social Services Division. The reply came quickly. Mr. Miller, this is not an official officer. The name Ms. Sari is not on our department's employee list. Her ID is fake. I smiled bitterly. So, Scarlett had hired someone to falsify an assessment. She wanted official evidence that I was incompetent so she could legally take over my assets. But she chose the wrong target. I wasn't a fool. I had lived 73 years facing many enemies in the business world. Scarlett was still too young to beat me. That night, I opened my laptop, collecting all the evidence. Screenshots of Scarlett's status, the recording of the conversation with the woman claiming to be from senior services, copies of voice messages from the family group where Scarlett hinted that I was no longer fit to live alone. I created a new folder titled Defamation Evidence. I saved everything neatly, one by one. Nothing was missed. But the most painful thing wasn't their attack. The most painful thing was seeing Scarlett's latest social media status. An old photo of Elaine and me on our wedding day. Scarlett uploaded it with the caption, "My father-in-law was once amazing, a successful entrepreneur, generous, respected by many. Now only an empty shadow remains. Oh God, what a trial." I stared at the laptop screen. A tear fell, not because I believed her words, but because she dared to use my late wife's photo to attack me. I closed the laptop, sitting in the darkness. Only the sound of the rain kept me company, but I didn't cry for long. I was too old for tears. I got up, washed my face, and returned to the laptop. I opened the final steps folder and started writing a plan. Tomorrow I would call the lawyer. I would fight back. Not with emotion, but with evidence. Not with shouting, but with the law. And just as I was about to close the laptop, my phone rang. A message from Mr. Dawson, an old business partner of mine. "Mr. Miller, sorry to bother you late. This afternoon, Brett came to my office. He said you were no longer capable of managing your assets and asked me to be the emergency financial advisor. He claimed you signed a power of attorney. But I was suspicious. I replied quickly, 'Lies, Mr. Dawson. I never signed anything. Don't believe him.' I had suspected as much. That's why I asked you directly. Mr. Miller, be careful. It seems Brett is desperate." I placed the phone on the desk, looking at the ceiling. I knew now. Brett didn't just want my money. He wanted to destroy me. He wanted to make me look insane in everyone's eyes so he could take over everything without resistance. But he forgot one thing. I was still alive, I was still fully conscious, and I would not surrender. I had built a real estate empire with just a map, a phone, and instinct. Now I would build a battlefield with documents, recordings, and a will that would prevent them from ever dancing on my honor again. I woke up earlier than usual that morning. The cold upstate New York air was biting, but my mind was clear. I showered, dressed neatly in a brown tweed jacket and black slacks, and took my old leather briefcase, the one I used for business meetings years ago. Inside the case, I placed all the evidence I had collected. Screenshots, recordings, incident notes, everything neatly organized in plastic folders. I hailed a cab towards downtown Manhattan. My destination? The law firm of Kernyawan and Associates, a firm that had helped me with property legalities decades ago. The building was the same, only the paint was newer. The receptionist greeted me warmly. "Good morning, sir. How may I help you?" "I have an appointment with Ms. Anita Williams." She checked her computer, then nodded. "Please take the elevator to the 3rd floor, sir. Room 305. I rode the elevator, my heart pounding, not from fear, but because I knew this was a huge step, a step that would change everything. Ms. Williams met me at the door of her office. A middle-aged woman with neat short hair, thick glasses, and a warm smile. She still remembered me. "Mr. Miller, it's been a long time. Please, come in." We shook hands, then sat on the comfortable sofa in her office. There was the aroma of fresh coffee from her desk. "Ms. Williams, I haven't come for a property matter this time. This is much more serious." I pulled all the documents from my briefcase, laying them on the table one by one. Ms. Williams put on her reading glasses and began to read intently. Her expression turned serious. This is bad, Mr. Miller. Very bad. I know, that's why I need your help. She read longer, occasionally nodding or frowning. After nearly half an hour, she looked up at me. Mr. Miller, this is no longer just a family dispute. This falls into the realm of criminal charges, forgery, defamation, even attempted fraud against a financial institution. I know, but I don't want to see my son in prison. I just want him to stop. Ms. Williams took off her glasses, looking at me with a soft gaze. Sir, as a lawyer, I have to tell you, if you are too gentle, they will keep pushing. But I understand this is your family, so what do you want? I want to protect my assets. I want to create a new will, and I want them to know I'm not a weak man they can trample on. She gave a thin smile. All right, let's get started. We spent nearly 3 hours in that room. Miss Williams outlined all the legal options I had. I listened carefully and made my decisions. First, will revision. I asked Ms. Williams to draft a new will. The content was simple but firm. Brett and Scarlett were removed from the list of heirs. The house in upstate New York would be bequeathed to the St. Jude's Children's Foundation. No, make that the local community foundation. The deposit in the bank would be allocated to a scholarship fund for a local community college. The Oregon acreage would be used for a community park and library. Are you sure, Mr. Miller? Ms. Williams asked. Absolutely. Rather than this money being used for fantasies and luxury, it's better used for people who need it. Very well, we will notarize it today. I'll call the notary and 2 witnesses. Second, asset access blockade. I asked Ms. Williams to issue official letters to all banks and financial institutions where I held accounts. The content, a total block on third-party access without my direct personal presence. No power of attorney would be considered valid unless executed in front of the notary with me physically present. Third, additional evidence collection. Ms. Williams suggested I install additional hidden cameras at home, record all phone conversations with Brett or Scarlett, and gather testimony from neighbors who knew the truth. Sir, I also recommend you set a small trap to test the extent of their intentions. A trap? Yes, a fake check, for example. Send it to them, see their reaction. If they try to cash it, that's additional evidence of their malicious intent. I like the idea. Devious, but effective. That afternoon, after all the documents were signed in the presence of the notary and 2 witnesses, one of whom was a respected community elder, I felt relieved. Like a great weight had been lifted from my chest. But I knew this was just the beginning. I returned home with a briefcase containing copies of the official documents, the new will, the blockade letters, the authenticated evidence, all safe. That evening, I sat at the dining table, planning my next move. I drafted the fake check for $1.3 million, the amount I had offered Brett, before he insulted me with the hot coffee. I placed the check in a brown envelope, sealed it with a stamp bearing the bank's logo. It looked official. The next morning, I sent it via courier service to Brett's home in suburban Long Island. Then I waited for their reaction. 2 days later, the reaction came. Not from Brett, but from Scarlett. A letter arrived at the house. A thick white envelope sent via express mail. I opened it carefully. Inside was an unofficial cease and desist letter, written in stiff, legalistic language, but full of threats. This serves as a formal request from the family of Mr. Radin Miller for Mr. Miller to honorably step down from the management of family assets and surrender control to the younger, more capable family members. Given Mr. Miller's declining mental health, this is for the mutual interest and social security of all parties. I read it to the end. At the bottom was the name of a lawyer I didn't recognize. I checked online. The name was not registered as an official attorney. It was a bluff. Scarlett was trying to intimidate me with a fake letter. I smiled bitterly. She thought I would be scared. That evening, Scarlett came alone, without Brett. She wore a long white dress, a white scarf, her face pale without makeup. She looked like a devout woman in mourning. I opened the door, looking at her without saying a word. "Dad," she said softly, her voice trembling. "May I come in?" I stepped back, allowing her entrance. We sat in the living room. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands folded in her lap, her head slightly bowed. "Dad, I didn't come here to fight. I just want to talk things out." "Talk about what?" She lifted her face, her eyes welling up. But I knew those tears were fake. I had lived too long to believe in crocodile tears. "Dad, if you were to pass away suddenly, where would the money go?" I was silent. So this was her goal. She didn't come for peace. She came to survey the situation. She wanted to know how safe their position was. "Did you come to ask about the money or about me?" She was startled. She hadn't expected me to turn the question back on her. "That's not it, Dad. I'm just worried. Brett is worried too. We're afraid if something happens to you, everything will fall apart." "Fall apart for whom? For me or for you?" Her face changed. The mask of piety began to crack. "Why are you like this, Dad? We genuinely care. But you're constantly suspicious." "Genuine? Do you call forging my signature, spreading lies on social media, and sending fake people claiming to be from senior services genuine?" She froze. She hadn't expected me to know everything. "Dad, that was all a misunderstanding. Get out. Get out of my house, now." She stood up, her face red, hands clenched. The mask had completely fallen off. "You'll regret this, Dad. We can take this to court." "Go ahead. I am ready." She left, slamming the door. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the door, still trembling. My heart ached, but my mind was clear. That night, I prayed the vigil prayer. I lingered on the prayer rug, asking for strength to face all this. Not physical strength, but mental strength. The strength to stand firm. Even though I was facing my own flesh and blood. After the prayer, I wrote a letter to the late Elaine. I wrote it by hand on yellowed paper. I tucked the letter inside her favorite prayer book. "Elaine, forgive me. I have to fight our son. Not because I hate him, but because you can no longer defend him. I know you'd be sad to see this, but I have no choice. Brett is no longer the Brett we knew. Pray for me from there." I closed the book, putting it back on the shelf. The next day, my phone rang. Brett. His voice was calm, even warm, as if nothing had ever happened. "Dad, let's have dinner. A reconciliation. Scarlett misses you. We'll talk everything out nicely. I promise. This time is different." I knew it was a trap, but I also knew it was an opportunity. An opportunity to end this once and for all. "Where? The Old Mill Steakhouse, Dad? Remember where we celebrated Mom's birthday?" I remembered the restaurant, a place full of memories. Beautiful memories, now tainted. "What time?" 7 p.m. I'll see you there, Dad." I hung up, looking at the calendar on the wall. Tomorrow night, the final dinner. I opened the safe, took out all the important documents, the new will, the evidence, the recordings, and put them all in my leather briefcase. Tomorrow I would bring everything. This was not a peace treaty. This was the final battlefield, and I would arrive fully armed. The dinner they designed as a stage to neutralize me turned into an unexpected courtroom where I would deliver the verdict with my own hands. That afternoon I prepared meticulously. I wore the old tweed blazer Elaine had chosen for important events. It still fit even though I had lost weight. I carefully tied the silk tie Brett had given me when he graduated college. My black leather shoes, last worn at my wife's memorial service, were polished until they gleamed. In the mirror, I saw the reflection of an old man ready for war. Not with weapons, but with the truth. I took my old brown leather briefcase. Inside, everything was neatly arranged. Copies of the new will, the recorded evidence, and complete documentation. The asset blockade letters and the trap check that they had not cashed. Everything was in clear plastic folders, easy to access. I did not take my personal car. I called a cab deliberately, so they wouldn't know how I was coming or what preparation I'd made. The cab driver was friendly, a talkative, middle-aged man. "Where to, sir? The Old Mill Steakhouse near Skaneateles Lake?" Yes, sir, something like that. The drive took about 40 minutes. I was silent the whole way, staring out the window, watching the city lights come on. My mind was calm. There was no longer any doubt. The Old Mill Steakhouse was busy, a restaurant styled like an old log cabin, with warm hanging lamps and a green garden outside. This place was full of memories. We used to come here often, the three of us, to celebrate important milestones. Now, I was coming here to end everything. I entered through the front door. A waiter greeted me warmly. "Good evening, sir. Reservation?" "Under Miller." He checked the guest book and nodded. "Table number 9, sir, in the corner by the window. Please follow me." I followed him past tables filled with families and young couples. Laughter and conversation filled the room. The atmosphere was warm. Ironic, because my heart was cold. Brett and Scarlett were already seated at table 9. The corner table had warm lighting from a wicker lamp. Brett stood up when he saw me, smiled widely, then stepped forward and hugged me. "Dad, you finally came. Sit down." His hug felt alien, insincere, like an actor playing a role. Scarlett also stood, wearing an elegant burgundy gown, heavy makeup, hair neatly pinned up. She shook my hand with a cold touch and a sweet smile. "Finally, Dad, you're open to talking again." I sat in the chair they pulled out. In front of me was a glass of water and a menu. Brett sat opposite, Scarlett next to him. They both looked at me with overly forced smiles. "What would you like to order, Dad? Their prime rib is excellent, or maybe the salmon steak." "You used to love the salmon, right?" Brett asked. "Whatever, anything." Brett called the waiter, ordering several dishes. Scarlett smiled, sipping her orange juice. The atmosphere was awkward, filled with a forced silence meant to appear comfortable. After the waiter left, Brett opened the conversation. "You look a little thinner, Dad. Are you healthy?" "I am. We want you to know we had no bad intentions. Everything that happened was a misunderstanding. We just want the best for you." I stayed silent, letting him talk. Scarlett chimed in, her voice soft, like she was coaxing a child. "Everyone blamed us, Dad, but we just want you to live comfortably, without burden, without having to think about assets, property, money." "So you want me to hand everything over to you?" Brett laughed awkwardly. "That's not what we mean, Dad. We want to help you manage everything so you can relax. You just enjoy your old age in peace." I looked into his eyes. There was no sincerity there, only calculation. The food arrived. Prime rib, salmon steak, seasonal vegetables, rolls. The aroma was delicious, but I had no appetite. Brett and Scarlett ate heartily, occasionally glancing at me. "Eat, Dad. Don't just stare at it," Scarlett said, smiling. I picked up the fork, taking a small bite of the salmon. It tasted bland on my tongue. After a few mouthfuls, Brett pulled a black folder from the bag he kept under the table. He placed it on the table beside my plate. "Dad, here's the proposal we put together. We've researched this for a long time. It's the best solution for you." I opened the folder. Inside were complete documents. A proposal to move me to an exclusive senior living facility in Scottsdale, costing $17,000 a month. Full facilities, private room, 24-hour nurse, Bible study, senior fitness, on-call doctor. Then, a power of attorney for asset management under Brett's name. The reason? Administrative ease and integrated management. On the next page, a schedule for the sale of the upstate New York house, complete with an estimated selling price, notary fees, and fund distribution. There was also a brochure for a luxurious condo in Miami that they wanted to buy with the proceeds from my house sale. I read everything calmly, without haste, page by page. And on one of the pages, I found the pre-registration approval for the senior facility. My name was written and the signature was already there, forged. I looked up, staring at Brett. "Whose signature is this?" "Signatures," he smiled awkwardly. "That's just an example, Dad, so you can visualize the process. We'll sign the real one later. This signature has already been used for the application, hasn't it?" His face changed. "Dad, don't think negative thoughts," Scarlett interjected, her tone harder. You can't even read all this without your glasses. It's time for you to rest. Hand the complicated stuff over to us." I placed the document on the table, looking at both of them with a cold stare. "You think I'm stupid?" Brett half rose from his chair. "Dad, we are here to talk nicely. Sit down." My voice was loud. Several guests at the next table turned their heads. Brett sat down again, his face red. Then he did something I already knew would happen. He grabbed the mug of hot coffee the waiter had just served and quickly pushed it toward me. The coffee spilled onto the white tablecloth, narrowly missing my hand. "If this is still not enough proof, you are incompetent. We'll take this to court," he said, his voice trembling. Scarlett was silent, but her eyes sparkled. She was enjoying this. I calmly took a napkin and wiped the spilled coffee from the table. Then I opened my briefcase. I took out document after document. I placed them slowly on the table. The new will, the recording from the fake assessment, the screenshot evidence of Scarlett's social media statuses, the recorded voice messages from the family group, the legal evidence that Brett had attempted to illegally mortgage my property. I laid it all out on the table, one by one. Brett snatched the documents, reading quickly, his face pale. This is slander. Someone framed you, Dad." I pulled out one more document, the trap check that they had never cashed. I placed it in the center of the table. "This money could have been yours, but now you won't get a dime." Scarlett reached for her phone, her hand trembling. But when I pointed my index finger toward the corner of the room, she saw the small camera recording from the direction of the bar. Her face turned white. Brett stood up, grabbing the documents. "Dad, you can't do this. This is our right." "Right? Where does this right come from? Is it your right as my children, or your right because you planned this for a long time?" I called the restaurant manager, who happened to be passing by. "Sir, please secure these documents as evidence. There is a criminal act happening here." The manager looked confused, but he saw the seriousness of the situation. "All right, sir. I'll call security." Brett panicked. "Dad, don't do this." I pulled out the last document, the request to freeze access to all my assets and accounts, which I had filed with all the banks the day before. It was officially stamped, already in effect. "You have dug your own graves, not mine," I said calmly. Scarlett suddenly stood up, her body swaying. Then she collapsed, fainting. Brett immediately lifted her, trembling, shouting for the waiter. People in the restaurant began to gather, whispering. Brett pulled Scarlett onto the chair, patting her cheek. Then he turned to me. His eyes were red, his voice hoarse. "Are you happy, Dad? You've destroyed this family." I stood up, picked up my briefcase, and looked at both of them for the last time. "Go home, Brett. But don't ever come back to my house. That house is not yours, it's not your family's, and it never will be." I walked out of the restaurant. The cold night air greeted me, but my heart was light. For the first time in months, I felt free. The best revenge is not rage, but tranquility. While they were busy looking for ways to retaliate, I was already at peace, reading a book, surrounded by children who smiled sincerely, not because of an inheritance, but because of a story. I arrived home with a heart that strangely felt light. The upstate New York sky was dark and foggy as usual, but this time the fog didn't feel suffocating. I opened the door, went inside, and closed it gently. Silence greeted me, but it was no longer a frightening silence. It was a peaceful silence. I put the leather briefcase on the living room table, opened the safe, and stored all the important documents neatly. Then, I took the copy of the forged power of attorney that Scarlett had tried to send to the notary without my knowledge. I took the document to the backyard, burning it in the metal waste bin. The flames glowed red. The paper turned to ash in minutes. I stared at the fire until it died out. Then I went back inside, brewed warm ginger tea, sat on the porch chair watching the fog slowly descend, covering the pine trees. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. The next morning, the news of the restaurant incident spread quickly. Somehow, perhaps from a waiter or another guest, the story reached the neighbor's ears. Mrs. Davis came early bringing a plate of blueberry scones. "Mr. Miller, we are all behind you," she said, smiling warmly. "Many of us were fooled by Scarlett's stories, but now everyone knows the truth." "Thank you, Mrs. Davis." "Sir, the neighborhood chat was buzzing last night. The women are embarrassed and want to apologize to you directly." "No need, Mrs. Davis. The important thing is that everything is clear now." That afternoon, several neighbors came. Mr. Johnson, the produce vendor, Mrs. Green from across the street, Mr. Allen, the retired teacher. They came one by one, bringing food, fruit, or just a greeting. They apologized for believing the slander. I accepted them graciously. I wasn't angry. I knew they were also victims of Scarlett's manipulation. At the church, the atmosphere completely changed. When I came for Sunday service, Mr. Peterson, the treasurer who had refused my donation, approached me with a look of shame. "Mr. Miller, please forgive us. We judged wrongly. If you are still willing, your donation is very much appreciated." I smiled. "It's all right, Mr. Peterson. I understand you were only being careful." "But we slandered you without checking the facts first, sir. Let it go. The important thing now is that we all learn not to be easily misled by rumors." After the service, the pastor, Pastor Michael, a wise middle-aged man who had led the sermon, approached me on the church steps. "Mr. Miller, may I chat for a moment?" "Please, Pastor." We sat on a wooden bench. The breeze was gentle, the atmosphere calm. "I heard what happened with your family. It's a heavy trial." "Thank God, Pastor, it's over now." "You don't hold a grudge?" I paused, considering the answer. "A grudge for what, Pastor?" "They destroyed themselves. I just didn't stop that destruction." Pastor Michael nodded slowly. "Very wise, sir, but don't you feel a loss?" "A loss of what? Your son?" I looked up at the sky, which was turning orange. "The son I knew was lost a long time ago, Pastor. What remains is a shell I no longer recognize." He patted my shoulder gently. "May God grant you peace, and may Brett realize his mistake and return someday. Amen." Weeks passed peacefully. I began to fill my time with meaningful activities. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, I volunteered at the local library reading to children. There were about 15 children, ages 5 to 12. They were enthusiastic, full of energy. I also joined the community garden program. We collected old books from residents, arranged them neatly in a gazebo in the park, and opened it every Saturday morning for children who wanted to read for free. I enjoyed those days. No drama, no deceit, just sincerity from children who smiled because they were happy, not because they wanted something from me. One day, I received an invitation from a senior advocacy organization to be a speaker at a small seminar on protecting senior assets from family exploitation. Initially, I hesitated, but Ms. Williams, my lawyer, advised me to accept. "Sir, your story can be a lesson for other seniors. Many go through the same thing, but they don't know what to do." I finally accepted. The seminar was held in a small hall in Albany. About 50 people attended, mostly seniors and their families. I stood at the podium, looking at them all. Then, I began to tell my story. I recounted my experience without directly naming Brett and Scarlett, about how family could turn into enemies, about the signs of manipulation, and the importance of protecting oneself legally. After the presentation, many came up to me. Some cried, some thanked me, some shared that they had experienced similar situations. An old woman, perhaps my age, held my hand tightly. "Thank you, sir. I thought I was the only one going through this. Turns out there are many." "You are not alone, ma'am," I said. "We must have the courage to fight back, even if it's family." Meanwhile, the money that Brett and Scarlett had tried to seize, I began to allocate according to the will I had made. I liquidated part of the bank deposit and handed it over to the community college for the full scholarship program for needy students. 50 students received full tuition assistance for 3 years. I also helped renovate a small community center in the next town whose roof was damaged. Funds from me, labor from the residents. In 2 weeks, the center was beautiful, clean, and busy again. Then there was a micro-enterprise program for single mothers in the neighborhood. I donated seed capital for them to learn to make handicrafts and baked goods. They sold their products and the profits went to their own living expenses. Every time I saw their smiles, the students who received scholarships, the residents praying in the renovated center, the mothers proud of their work, I felt my money was more meaningful in their hands than it would have been in the hands of Brett and Scarlett. One afternoon, I received a call from Ms. Williams. "Mr. Miller, there's a development. Brett and Scarlett tried to contest your will in court. The judge dismissed the case entirely. Your will is legally sound. Their evidence of manipulation was too strong. The judge even issued a strong reprimand to their lawyer for filing a baseless lawsuit." I smiled. "Thank you for the update, Ms. Williams. There's more, sir?" Scarlett tried to complain on social media again, but this time no one believed her. In fact, many criticized her. Her social media account lost many followers. Her online business is also quiet. "I don't feel happy about that, Ms. Williams, but I don't feel sorry for her either." "I understand, sir." A few days later, I was sitting on the porch reading a book when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked through the curtains. It was Brett's white Lexus SUV. He got out alone. His face was thin, eyes sunken, clothes crumpled. He stood in the driveway, staring at the front door, but didn't take a step forward. I walked out, standing on the porch. We stared at each other from a distance. "Dad," his voice was hoarse, "can I come in?" I didn't answer. He took a step closer, stopping at the porch steps. "Dad, I want to apologize." "Apologize for what?" "For everything, for the coffee I threw at you, for the slander, for all of it." I looked into his eyes. No tears, just exhaustion. "Are you apologizing because you realized your mistake or because you lost?" He froze, unable to answer. "Go home, Brett. You won't get anything from here." "Dad, I didn't come for money. I just came home." He stood there for a long time, as if wanting to say more. But finally he turned, got in the car, and drove away. I walked back into the house. No regret, no sadness, just an emptiness I had already accepted. The following week I returned to my routine. Reading with the children, going to the community garden, attending service. My life was simple, peaceful, full of meaning. One morning as I sat in the gazebo, a little girl named Lisa, 6 years old, chubby cheeks, big eyes, pulled my hand. "Grandpa Miller, tell us a story again about the patient prophet." I smiled, stroking her head. "I will, honey. But this time, Grandpa wants to tell you about someone who wasn't patient and then regretted it." "Who, Grandpa?" "You'll hear it yourself." She laughed and ran to her friends. I sat on the wooden bench, watching the children play. They laughed freely, without burden, without calculation. This was what I'd been searching for all along. Sincerity. In my pocket was an old photo. A picture of Brett when he was little, smiling widely, hugging me. I took the photo out, looked at it for a moment, then put it back. "Forgive me, Brett," I whispered softly. "I couldn't save you from yourself." The wind blew gently. The pine tree leaves rustled softly. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and slowly exhaled. It wasn't me who destroyed them. They dug their own ruin. I just didn't stop it. And at the age of 73, I finally found peace. Not from wealth, not from family, but from the sincerity of letting go of what could no longer be saved. I opened my eyes, smiled faintly, and got up to join the children in their reading. Life was still long, and I would live it my own way, without burden, without regret, only with the tranquility I had won. From the hardest battle of my life, fighting my own flesh and blood and winning.